John, it's so great being with you here today. Super excited about our conversation. My name is Julie. I'm Julie Schallhorn. I'm the Associate Professor at the University of California, San Francisco. I'm a cataract, cornea, and refractive surgeon. I'm joined by John.
Well, thank you, Julie, and it is a pleasure. I learn so much from you every time we're together, and this is something I've been looking forward to. My name is John Vukich. I am an ophthalmologist, general ophthalmologist, primarily cataract and refractive, located out of Madison, Wisconsin. And we've had a lot of experience. I've had a lot of experience with the different types of IOLs, and I know, Julie, you have too, and you do a lot of teaching. And so I think we'd kind of like to touch on the impact of the lens materials that we have available and optical quality. And we could even talk about not even just the materials, but maybe even just the manufacturing and how do we optimize the quality that the lens provides. And so I think that that's really the kind of where we're going now.
It totally is because, you know, John, cataract surgery nowadays is not, I got the cataract out, success. Cataract surgery nowadays is the patient happy? Do they have great quality of vision? Do they enjoy their vision? So these things, you know, as we continue to optimize the surgical procedure, these things become more and more important in terms of getting our patients the best possible outcomes.
Absolutely. And more goes into it than just the quality of the material. It's all of the things that lead up to the selection of the implant. And so our patients, I mean, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm in Wisconsin, and it doesn't matter. We have, you know, little ladies from farms, and it doesn't matter. They never say, you're the doctor. They say, well, I need glasses afterwards, and will I be able to read? So everyone is now a consumer of a refractive outcome, and we have to be able to provide that.
They are, and you know, they absolutely are, you know, and it's great because, you know, it's our job to give patients the best quality of vision that we possibly can, and it's great that patients are coming and asking for it because it prompts me to think about these solutions and me to really like drill down into these lenses more to really understand them to provide for the patients.
So there's different materials that are out there. There's acrylic, which is the predominant in the United States market, and there's two varieties of that, either hydrophilic or hydrophobic. There's silicone and Collamer for a phakic IOL. But maybe if you have some thoughts on the optical quality that some of these materials might confer, and how you choose, like what makes that decision part of your process?
It's a good question. You know, there's multiple things that go in that the lens manufacturer, and it comes down. It's actually the material and the shape, the design of the lens, and there's multiple differences that can really influence how patients see afterwards. One is the refractive index of the lens, you know, how strongly it bends light. Lenses with higher refractive index, higher ABI numbers, have more chromatic aberration, as we know, and that can play into a patient's visual quality. That gets really compounded when we start talking about diffractive optics, because once you talk about chromatic aberration, the diffractive grating on our diffractive optic lens also induce chromatic aberration, so that can be a compounded problem. And then the third is, you know, how the lens is shaped in terms of giving patients the phenomenon we know of, you know, positive dysphotopsia or negative dysphotopsia, and then also where it sits within the eye. So all of these properties of the lens can have a pretty big impact on patient photic phenomena, visual quality, and what they, you know, how they see after surgery.
So one of the things that comes back upon occasion, and actually it's not rare, but the glint that patients will sometimes, actually not the patients, but their significant other, others will see, well, you'll get that little sparkle, which, you know, some have said, my son thinks that there's, you know, a devil in my eyes or something like that. But, you know, so some of the lenses have that. And I don't know that the patients have a sense of that, but it is observable to others.
It is observable to others. My favorite patient, actually, one time she came back to me, she's like, my granddaughter tells me that I have butterflies in my eyes. What are the butterflies?
Like sparkles.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, oh, I love it. You have butterflies. That's so cute. But you know, that's the, you know, it has to do with the curvature of the lens, and so lenses with higher refractive index require less curvature change to induce the same amount of refraction. So like our natural crystalline lens has like a lower refractive index, so the surface, the interior surface is fairly curved. Once you get a flatter lens, you get much more, it's much easier for light going in to reflect off that and coming back out. So that's typically a property of our hydrophilic acrylic IOLs.
Right.
That you get the butterfly phenomenon.
It is an issue, I think. And some patients, you know, think that it's, you know, cute, and others find it a little bit disconcerting, especially those in the public eye, where if they're on camera, they're also, you know, part of you know, in a group where they present themselves, where that it can be distracting.
Yeah, definitely.
So the Collamer material simply doesn't have that glint. It doesn't have an anterior reflection. And so with phakic IOLs, which is really the only place that Schallhorn shows up, you can almost think of it as sort of a satin type surface. And of course, that doesn't degrade the quality because the optical quality is very high, but you don't get that glint.
Yeah.
And so that part of it is, again, material dependent.
Yeah, it definitely is. So, I guess I have a question for you. Do you tell patients that might occur if you're planning on putting in a hydrophobic acrylic IOL? I don't.
I don't. If they notice it, we'll talk about it.
Exactly. That's where I'm at as well.
Yeah,
So,
it's almost like if you raise the question, then they start looking for it, and most of them won't see it anyway. And I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that. There's other things we talk about.
A lot of consent for a lot of things, but not that.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the dysphotopsias, whether they're positive or negative. That's certainly it's a real thing, and to some extent that's material dependent, but I think it has more to do with anterior capsule overlap and technique, quite frankly.
Exactly, yeah, and a little bit the edge shape as well, with those hard square edges that tend to cast a little bit more, at least we think a little bit more. I mean, nobody really knows what's going on with those photopsias, but you tend to definitely see them more in lenses with the hard square edges rather than a silicon lens, which has more rounded edges, but you can still see with a silicon lens as well.
Do you purposely orient your non-toric lenses at 6 to 12 or 9 to 3?
Yeah, it's a good question. I follow Sam Maskett's work,
right.
and I am a 9 to 3 orienter with my single piece hydrophobic acrylic IOLs, just for the literature that he has suggested that it decreases the risk of photopsias.
I do the exact same thing, and I wished I could tell you I had the science behind it to say that I've followed everyone and whether or not it's there.
Yeah.
But quite frankly, I haven't had a patient complain of it since I started doing that, and this is now well over a couple thousand lenses later. So I do think there's something to it. So technique matters, actually.
Technique does. I think technique totally matters. I mean, obviously with a toric, you can't change that around, but I do think it matters. And then what do you tell when your patient comes in with photopsias? What do you tell them? What's the conversation that you have with them?
Play for time. A lot of times it does get better. And I don't know if it's simply, neuroadaptation is half just getting tired of complaining about it, and they just get used to it.
I love that.
And
That's awesome.
a lot of times it just simply goes away, but it doesn't always. And some people will, especially the negative dysphotopsias tend to be more problematic, where I've got this shadow and it's just there all the time. If they are not, I will offer I'll do a secondary procedure. Well, I'll do a capsular rhexis, or I'll do a capsular capture of the implant, and a lot of times that will take care of it. I haven't done an exchange for a long period of time, but that is at the end of the day. Is it so bad that you want to go back to the OR and take it away and exchange? And a lot of times, given that option, they'll say no.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know what your experience has been with that. What do you do with them?
It's very similar. I mean, the positive dysphotopsias, I think, all get better with time.
Right.
And I theorize that's just opacification of the capsule,
right.
kind of eliminating that source of light scatter. The negative ones tend to be more problematic. And I'd say most of the time, people, unless they're really not committed, getting a pair of glasses with heavy frames helps them kind of mentally kind of move past that. And then I have done both, either a secondary IOL if there's a refractiveness, reverse optic, capture, bringing that optic in front of the capsular bag. And then I have done a couple of exchanges for people that are just extremely, extremely symptomatic.
Do you think that is material dependent to have the dysphotopsias? I mean, do we see that? I don't recall actually seeing that with the silicone lenses that I used to put quite a few in, although it must happen. And quite frankly, when there was a Collamer IOL, which there isn't anymore, but I remember in my career, I had done several thousand Collamer implants for cataracts, and people were talking about these dysphotopsias, and I'm going, I don't know what you're talking about. I never saw one.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen with that material.
Yeah, I think there is probably a material component to it because, it depends on, we think, it's probably dependent upon how light is being bent at the periphery of the lens. And obviously that's going to be different between different IOL materials depending upon the refractive index. So that does make sense.
Okay, so we talked about a anterior capsular capture. Are there other adjustments that could be made? I mean, are there things that we can do, or that's kind of it, really,
That's
isn't
pretty
it?
much it to account for the dysphotopsias, just moving that in front of, moving the optic in front of the capsule so you don't have that overlap there, which was what, we theorize is the source of those dysphotopsias. Other adjustments for IOLs, there's not, I don't think we know enough about exactly why it's happening to really be able to drill in and make these adjustments to get rid of it.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I have followed very carefully what Sam Maskett has taught us, and I think he has one of the best understandings of this. And so, again, I follow his recommendations, and I do think in the recommendations, of course, on how you position the haptics at 6 to 9, which is good, or I'm sorry, 3 to 9, has been helpful. Let's touch on glistenings for a second. Has that problem been solved? Do we know?
Yeah, I mean, only time will tell, really,
right.
is the question with glistenings, because, glistenings, of course, accumulate over time, and it has to do with the manufacturing process, in terms of like how the lenses, it only happens in, hydrophobic acrylic lenses, how the lenses are made and how water-free you can get the material. The newer materials that we're seeing have either a markedly reduced rate of glistenings or are, claimed to be glistening free,
right.
which I certainly hope they are.
I do too, and I do some pediatric cases, and I always think, all right, well, this is a lens that I have to make a decision that will be the right decision 50, 60, 70, 80 years from now.
Exactly.
We know these lenses don't wear out, they don't move, they don't stop working, but are they somehow over time going to degrade? So I'm always a little bit worried about the type of lens that I choose. And if there's a history of glistenings, even though we believe the manufacturing has been changed, I don't know.
Yeah, well,
I don't know. Well, time will tell.
When that child is 7 years old, we'll have our answer.
Yeah, but I won't be here.
Exactly.
Yeah, it'll be the partner of my partner's child who will be taking care of them.
And of course, the manufacturers do accelerated aging for all these. They try out everything that they possibly can, but inside the human body is a unique environment, and we can't exactly replicate that.
So, do you think that the properties of the materials we choose influence patient satisfaction?
I think that in some ways they do, in terms of the dysphotopsias and the visual quality. I think that a bigger factor is, the shape of the lens and the, any inherent photopsias induced by a specific shape of the lens. Like, for example, a diffractive grating is going to induce chromatic aberration. Some patients are sensitive to that, some patients are not sensitive to that, and that is going to have a much bigger influence on the patient satisfaction than really anything to do with lens material. What do you think about that?
I think the manufacturing process is really 95% of it. I think the materials that we have are good. I mean, there's ANSI standards, and the metrology for all of these lenses are excellent. The optical quality, the bench quality, they come through with very high standard of focus and higher order aberrations inherent in the lens itself. So the manufacturing techniques have been very, very good. And so it's really kind of hard to say. Now, some lenses, they will dial in the amount of spherical aberration, and they may choose that to enhance different characteristics of the lens, but it's not material specific. It's what does the manufacturer choose to do? Exactly,
yeah. It's shape specific. It's just to the lens. But the materials are great, and I totally agree with you. Sometimes I when I'm paying my taxes, I'm just like, God, I spend so much money and give so much money to the government. But then when it comes to the ANSI, I'm actually on the ANSI standard committee now for lenses.
Oh, did I touch a nerve?
No.
Thank you. I am so glad that you are an advocate. Thank you. Thank you.
But it's things like that, like these standards that really ensure super high quality products that are. It takes a lot of work to go through, and it takes a lot of people a lot of time to do, but it ends up being safer and better for our patients.
Absolutely. There's no question. Do you look at the amount of spherical aberration that we are having in the lens material?
Absolutely. It's super important because, you need to know how much spherical aberration is in the lens material so you can match it with the patient's cornea.
Okay, so that is, and I have to say that I should be more conscious of that. I sort of have my go-to lenses, and of course I'll make some changes based on whether or not they have had previous LASIK or RK. But for the majority of patients, I really don't choose a lens specifically because of either aberrometry or corneal topography.
I'm the same way, actually. So if they have, you look at the corneal shape. If they have an overall normal corneal shape, then I tend to not do that. But it is when they're post-RK, they have a scar. They're post-refractive surgery in any way, that's when you really start thinking about it.
Good. All right, well, this has been a great conversation, Julie. Thank you so much. I always learn so much when we get a chance to get together, and I hope this has been helpful, and look forward to the next time we can chat.
Indeed, John, always a pleasure to chat with you. Thanks so much.